And so Iran is pounding Israel and the world is rejoicing.
I think what's going on is that you're looking at the beginning of the end.
And so as the Israelis grow in their arrogance, they will grow in their recklessness, and they will continue to do wars. They will continue to do the killings. They will continue to bring about destruction to their neighbors. And as Israel continues in its recklessness, Israel will continue to hammer nails into its coffin. Israel weakened Iran in Syria. Israel weakened Iran in Lebanon. Israel weakened Iran in the South Caucasus. And in every single one of those situations, Turkey got stronger. So now you're hitting Iran itself. You're not just hitting a proxy, you're hitting Iran itself, which means you're going to make Turkey even more powerful. So Israel is feeding the beast. Israel is paving the path towards its own demise. And its hubris will be deflated. And the world will say, "Here lies Jerusalem in flames. Jerusalem, Jerusalem has fallen." All right, everyone. So let's talk about Israel. Israel right now is getting pounded by the Iranians and the world is rejoicing.
Oh my God. Holy shit! Oh my God! Yo!
זה מיירטים אבל. הנה. יואו! יואו, תפסתי את זה, אני לא מאמין.
People have zero sympathy for Israel. They do not give a damn about Israel. Why? Because they look at Israel and they think to themselves, this is the country that slaughtered the Gazans. This is the country that did a genocide of the Gazan people. This is the country that mocked the suffering of the Gazans. This is the country that dropped bombs on civilian neighborhoods in Gaza. This is the country that incinerated thousands of Palestinians in 6,000 plus degree temperatures. Why should we give a damn about what Israel is going through? And so Iran is pounding Israel and the world is rejoicing. And the Israelis are just full of hubris. They are filled with arrogance. They think, well, you know, the Iranians are bombing us, sure, but we have our bomb shelters. Well, the Iranians just recently dropped a missile onto an Israeli bomb shelter and 9 Israelis were killed. And the Iranians are sending a message to the Israelis: do not put your faith in bomb shelters. We can penetrate your bomb shelters. And it reminds me of the warning that Eric Weinstein gave to Israel while doing an interview with Piers Morgan after the 12-day war between Israel and Iran. Eric Weinstein said that the Israelis are full of hubris. They think to themselves, well, you know, the Iranians bombed us, but you know, it really wasn't so bad because they didn't defeat us. They couldn't really kill a lot of us, so it really wasn't so bad. Iran is not really a major threat, etc., etc. And Mr. Weinstein said that these Israelis just don't get it.
And so when Iran originally set hypersonic missiles into the ground of Israel, killing almost no one, many Israelis responded by saying, you see how incompetent they are? They couldn't kill any of us. And the Iranians must have just been shaking their heads and saying, my gosh, you guys have no idea that we're sending you a message that Iron Dome doesn't work fully for hypersonics. I think what's going on is that you're looking at the beginning of the end. This, you know, once those things are loaded with nuclear weapons, you are talking about a completely different world, and you just saw the beginnings of it. This is the slow roll into a new world where we watch hypersonic missiles slam into a populated metropolis. You know, I lived in Israel for 2 years, and Har means mountain, and there's a place called Megiddo where there's a mountain, and Har Megiddo is where we get the word Armageddon. So Armageddon is just a turnoff in Israel. And, you know, the world has never, civilization has never ended due to thermonuclear warfare. So it's in no one's data set. So everyone who's data driven says, oh, I wouldn't worry so much about it, because they're just not getting it.
The Iranians were sending a message. We can land missiles onto your country, and just one day, one of these missiles could just be armed with a nuclear weapon. But the Israelis continue with their hubris because, to quote Mr. Weinstein, they just don't get it. And so as the Israelis grow in their arrogance, they will grow in their recklessness, and they will continue to do wars. They will continue to do the killings. They will continue to bring about destruction to their neighbors. And as they continue in their recklessness, they will continue to hammer nails onto their coffins, because as they continue down this road of hubris and war and killing and their sanguinary actions, the world will grow in their resentment against Israel. The Americans will grow in their rage and in their resentment against Israel, and eventually Israel will be abandoned. The harlot will be abandoned by her lovers, and the world will look upon Jerusalem, and as Jerusalem is engulfed in flames, people will say, Jerusalem, Jerusalem has fallen. People are looking at this war and they're thinking, there is no purpose of this war. There is no sense in this war. The Pentagon just came out recently to say, well, we knew all along that Iran was not going to be attacking the United States. And so people ask, then what in the hell is the purpose of this war? And they see Marco Cain Rubio doing this press conference expressing a justification for this war, really for this unjust war. And Marco Cain Rubio is standing before the press and he says, well, we really had to start this war against Iran. We really had to attack Iran because we knew that if we attacked Iran, Iran would attack us.
There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage.
So you're admitting that the entire purpose of this war was to provoke the Iranians to attack you, when you knew all along that the Iranians had no intentions nor plans to attack you. So this war is unjust and it has zero sense. And so people look at this situation and they think, okay, we're doing this senseless, unjust war in conjunction with Israel, and the Israelis have been pushing for this war for years. And so they come to the conclusion quite naturally that this is another war for Israel. This is like the Iraq War, in which the Mossad gave us false intelligence that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and was planning to attack the United States, and the Americans believed it, and so they did this horrendous war against Iraq, and it was absolutely disastrous. And it led to nothing good. And now the Israelis are giving us this intelligence about Iran planning to attack the United States, and people are telling us to believe it. But the Pentagon comes out and says, actually, no, the Iranians weren't planning on attacking us. So we're being lied to, and we're being dragged into an unjust, senseless war. And according to Marco Cain Rubio, we had to attack Iran because we knew that if we attacked Iran, they would attack us back. What type of lunatic statement is this, Mr. Marco Cain Rubio? Is this a cocaine in the brain type moment for you? And so people look at this and they're thinking, okay, this is really just for Israel. And so the rage, the resentment, the anger, the animosity against Israel is only going to grow. And as Israel continues in its recklessness, Israel will continue to hammer nails into its coffin, because eventually Israel is going to be abandoned. And there is another country that is watching all of this from the sidelines, waiting for the right moment to strike, and that is Turkey. Turkey is watching all of this, and Turkey has plans to send troops into Iran. And this is not me making things up. This is not me just speculating here. This is what the Turkish government government is saying, Turkey is saying, if things become too chaotic in Iran, we will send troops into northern Iran in order to prevent a refugee crisis coming to our borders. We don't want to have millions of Iranian refugees entering our country, so we are going to be sending troops into northern Iran if things become too chaotic, too unstable in Iran. And so Turkey is using this situation to really provide a pretext for military expansion into Iran. And so the Israelis are wanting this war. They are very excited about this war. This is something that they want. They want to defeat the Iranians, and they want to destroy the Ayatollah regime because they don't want to have this country that is in competition with Israel. Israel wants to be the most powerful country in the Middle East. And so if you have this Iranian regime that has ballistic missiles, that country is a threat to Israel's dominance over the Middle East. Israel cannot have that. So Israel wants this war. But here's the thing. It doesn't really matter. It does not really matter what outcome takes place as a result of this war. Israel is going to be screwed because Israel is going to have to face a rising Turkey. So let's say you have just pure chaos in Iran. Let's say that the regime is still there. Let's say that the IRGC is still there, but there is just chaos and lawlessness and a lot of instability in Iran. Turkey is going to say, oh, look, we have all these Iranian refugees who want to come live in Turkey because Turkey is a much more stable country. It's a member of NATO. So we really don't want to deal with this because the last time we had a massive case of instability on our border, 3 million Syrian refugees entered our country, and that has caused a lot of issues for our economy. It has also caused a lot of nationalistic and tribalistic resentment because a lot of Turkish people don't like Syrian refugees. So we don't really want to have to deal with another situation like that. So we're going to have to send troops into northern Iran, and you're going to see Turkish troops in Iran, and that is going to be Turkish expansion into Iran, and that is going to be the further growth of Greater Turkey, because we are already seeing Greater Turkey. The idea of Greater Turkey, the idea of a revived Ottoman Empire is already here. It has already manifested itself. It's not something that's a pipe dream. It's not something that is, that's just this abstract idea. It is amongst us. We have Turkey controlling the majority of Syria. So this revived Turkish Empire is already amongst us. It's already here. So if Turkey sends troops into Iran, it'll be another installation into Greater Turkey. It'll be another example of Turkish expansionism, and that'll be Turkey getting stronger. So this war is weakening Iran, but here is a lesson that recent memory gives us. Every time Iran gets weaker, Turkey gets stronger, and we see this time and time again. For example, when Bashar al-Assad got overthrown, that was Iran getting weaker and Turkey got stronger. When the Armenians were defeated in Nagorno-Karabakh by Turkey and Azerbaijan, that was Iran's proxy in the South Caucasus getting defeated, and thus Iran getting weaker, and thus Turkey got stronger. And so now we are weakening Iran itself. We're not weakening a proxy of Iran. We are weakening Iran itself. We are weakening the biggest rivalry to Turkey after Israel. And so with Iran getting weaker, now Turkey is going to get even more strong. Turkey is going to become even more dominant in the Middle East. And so if you have this horrendous chaos in Iran due to this war, Turkey's going to say, well, we have to bring stability. And the Americans are going to say, well, we need Turkey to enter Iran to bring stability to the region. And that's exactly what they said about Syria. When Syria was engulfed in civil war, when Syria was engulfed in chaos and instability, NATO and the United States and the British and the French and the Germans were all welcoming Turkey as a force of stability in Syria. So Turkey got stronger. And now the Israelis are saying, well, we need this war in Iran. We have to weaken the Iranians because we want to dominate the Middle East. Well, guess what? If you weaken Iran, Turkey's going to get stronger. So Turkey is going to be the winner after all of this. That is going to be the outcome of this. And we've seen this. We've seen this recently. We saw this with the toppling of Assad. And I knew, going all the way back to the beginning of this, going all the way back to the beginning of the Syrian civil war, I knew that once Assad is taken out, Turkey will enter. I knew that with the instability in Syria, Turkey was going to enter. And it happened. I saw it. And it was very obvious from the beginning. So when you weaken Iran, Turkey gets stronger. What is the Israeli government saying about Turkey? What did Naftali Bennett say about Turkey recently? What did the Israeli government say about Turkey recently? That Turkey is Israel's biggest existential threat. And so I can't help but think to myself, okay, Israel, you know that Turkey is your biggest existential threat. Then why are you strengthening Turkey? What is this insanity? This is absolute insanity. And when Turkey entered Syria, it did so under two pretexts. One was to prevent a further refugee crisis from Syria into Turkey, but the other pretext was to fight against Kurdish terrorism, Kurdish separatist terrorism, because for many years, the Turks have dealt with Kurdish separatists, the PKK in Turkey, and 40,000 people have been killed in that conflict between the Turks and the PKK. Well, there is another group of Kurdish separatists in Syria. They are known as the SDF. Now, they were formerly known or priorly known as the YPG, and the Turks went into Syria to fight against the YPG. Now, they also went into Syria to fight against ISIS. That's another pretext for them entering Syria. But they also went into Syria to fight against the YPG because the YPG was networking with the PKK in Turkey. And so the Turks said, okay, we have this YPG Kurdish separatist force in Syria. They're networking with these Kurdish terrorists within our borders. We have to go into Syria to fight against them. And so they went into Syria and they fought against the YPG. Well, the YPG was and is an ally of the United States. And the United States began to back the YPG as a proxy against ISIS. So they were an American ally. The Americans then remarketed and rebranded the YPG and made their title into the SDF, changed their title into the SDF, or the Syrian Democratic Forces. And so the SDF became this serious American proxy against ISIS. And the Turks were fighting against the SDF at the same exact time. So you would think, okay, the Turks are fighting the SDF, but the SDF are an American ally. Surely the Americans are not going to betray their Kurdish ally for the interest of the Turks. But you would be wrong. That's exactly what happened just recently. Turkey said, we want to unite all of Syria under Ankara. We want to unite all of Syria. The problem was that the SDF effectively had a Kurdish state in northeastern Syria. They had their own military, they had their own government offices. It was effectively an independent Kurdish state in northeastern Syria. The Turks said, listen, we want to control all of Syria, and we can't control all of Syria if you have this Kurdish state within a state in Syria. And so we have to defeat the SDF. We have to force them to integrate into the Syrian military. The SDF came out and said, we're not going to drop our guns. We're not going to put down our weapons. By our cold, dead hands, you're not going to take away our guns. And the reason why the SDF had such confidence and obstinance is because they thought that the Israelis would provide them with military support. They thought that the Israelis may provide them with air support against the Syrian army, against the Turkish military. Nope. The Israelis did not help the SDF. And what happened? The Turks said, okay, Kurds, you guys don't want to drop your weapons. You guys don't want to abandon your aspirations of a Kurdish state in Syria. We're going to now do a war against you. we're now going to attack you. And the Turkish military backed the Syrian military against the SDF, and the SDF was defeated. And Turkey further consolidated its power in Syria, and Turkey got stronger, and Turkey did even more expansionism within Syria and took control over more of Syria, took control really over northeastern Syria. And this was a major win for the Turks because northeastern Syria, where the SDF/Kurds were ruling, has a lot of oil, a lot of natural resources. And that oil was a major source of financial wealth, financial strength for the SDF. So the Turks took that over. So the Turks got stronger under the auspices of the United States, under the green light of the United States, with the blessing of America. Turkey defeated the Kurdish ally of the United States in Syria, the SDF. And so now you have the Israeli government and the American government talking about using the Kurds in Iran as a proxy against the Iranian government. And so there is an Iranian separatist paramilitary organization in Iran. It's called PJAK or PJAK. This is a major Kurdish paramilitary group. And the PJAK has networked with the SDF/YPG in Syria. It has networked with the PKK in Turkey. It is a part of this greater Kurdish network for an independent Kurdistan. And so the Americans were thinking, okay, we can use the Kurdish separatists to fight against the Iranian government. Well, let's say that happens, right? Let's say that they successfully arm these Kurds and back them and start supporting them in their fight against the Iranian government. Because for many years, the Iranian government has fought with the PJAK, has fought with these Kurdish separatists. And so the Americans and the Israelis were thinking, we can use these people as proxies. Well, let's say that they use them as proxies. And America and Israel have their little Kurdish ground force in Iran. The Turks are going to step in, just like they did in Syria. Because remember, they said, hey, we have these Kurdish separatists in Syria being backed by the United States. We're now going to go into Syria and fight them. And Turkey got stronger and Iran got weaker. So the Israelis and the Americans are playing a similar game with Iran. And it looks like they might just use Kurdish proxies. And if they decide to use Kurdish proxies, and these Kurdish proxies are actually out on the battlefield, they're fighting with the IRGC, Turkey's going to say, okay, we have Kurdish terrorists on our border fighting the Iranian government. We got to go fight them. And they will deploy troops into Iran in the name of fighting against Kurdish separatist terrorism, just as they did in Syria, sending troops into northern Syria to fight against Kurdish separatists. But here's the thing, that was all just a pretext. It was really a pretext to cover up the real intention of the Turkish government, which is Greater Turkey and reviving the Turkish/Ottoman Empire. And so the Turks went into Syria saying, we're going to fight against these Kurdish separatists, we're going to fight against ISIS, we're going to bring stability. Well, Assad has been toppled and the Kurds have been vanquished. So Turkey, why are you still in Syria? Your mission has been accomplished. Your mission has been completed. You're still sticking around. Because it wasn't about fighting the Kurds. It was always about Turkish empire. It was always about Greater Turkey. And so if you look at a map, you will see right next to Turkey, you have the South Caucasus. Right above Iran, you have the South Caucasus. You have Azerbaijan, which borders with Turkey. But in the middle of Azerbaijan was Nagorno-Karabakh, which was an Armenian enclave ruled by Armenians. And these Armenians were being backed by the Iranians. And what did the Israelis do? The Israelis said, let's defeat those Armenians using the Azeri Turks as a proxy in order to weaken Iran's position in the South Caucasus. The Turks said, we're also going to be backing the Azeris against the Armenians. The Armenians got defeated and Iran got weaker. But who got stronger? Who got stronger? Turkey got stronger. Same thing with Syria. And it looks like they want to play the same game in Iran. And so if they empower the Kurds in Iran, Turkey will say, okay, now we have a reason to enter Iran. We have a reason to enter northern Iran. And let's say that the Israelis and the Americans foment and cause so much chaos in Iran that Iran becomes lawless and just full of instability, the Turks will say, okay, our next door neighbor is filled with instability, and we don't want that chaos and instability to boil over into our country because we don't want to deal with another refugee crisis. We're going to be deploying troops into northern Iran. And so Turkey will get stronger. So no matter how you look at it, Turkey is going to get stronger because Iran is getting weaker. Turkey got stronger by weakening Iran's position in the South Caucasus. Turkey got stronger by Israel and America weakening Iran's position in Syria. Turkey got stronger because of Israel and America weakening Iran's position in Lebanon with the killing of Hassan Nasrallah and the weakening of Hezbollah. So everything that America and Israel are doing is simply strengthening Turkey. And the Israelis are terrified of Turkey. You have, for example, Mr. Yoav Gallant, who I believe is a former defense minister of the Israeli government. And Mr. Gallant recently wrote an article for Ma'ariv, which is an Israeli newspaper. And he said that it really doesn't matter if we defeat the Ayatollah. It doesn't matter if we defeat the Iranians because Turkey is going to get stronger. So the Israelis know this. The intelligent people of Israel know this. So I'm thinking to myself, why is Israel doing this? Israel is paving the path forward towards its own demise and destruction. And it reminds me of a story in the Bible. There is a story in the Bible, 1 Kings chapter 22, the death of King Ahab. How did King Ahab finally die? How did the rule of King Ahab finally end? Well, King Ahab wanted to do a war against Syria. He said, I'm going to do this war against Syria. And he had this army of prophets. He had this group of prophets that he would go to. And he went to these prophets and he said, well, am I going to win this war? And these prophets would say, oh yes, great King Ahab, you're going to win this war. And so they really boosted up his confidence. And God hated King Ahab. And God wanted to end the rule of King Ahab because Ahab was wicked. He was evil. This was the guy who was married to Jezebel. Jezebel slaughtered God's prophets. Jezebel persecuted the prophet Elijah. God really hated King Ahab. And so what did God do? God goes to his army, his symphony of spirits, and he says, who among you will go to King Ahab and trick him into going to war against Syria? And one spirit goes before God and says, I will go. Send me, Lord. And this spirit goes to the prophets of Ahab and enters them and influences them and gets them to say, oh yes, King Ahab, go to war against Syria. God will give you victory. And there was one other prophet who was not influenced by this deceiving spirit. His name was Micaiah. And the prophet Micaiah was not a liar. And Micaiah said, you're going to lose, Ahab. You're going to lose. And King Ahab was so angered by this that he ordered his men to arrest Micaiah. And he said, throw this prophet into prison. Remember what Christ told the Pharisees. He said, you guys killed the prophets. You guys persecuted the prophets. This was yet another example of this. And so prophet Micaiah was thrown into prison. And the other prophets were caressing Ahab's ego. And Ahab went to war against Syria. And the Syrians said, let's only attack the king. Let's not bother ourselves with fighting the other soldiers of Israel. Let's only attack King Ahab. And King Ahab disguised himself to where people couldn't really recognize him as the king because he knew the Syrian strategy, and so he didn't want the Syrians to attack him. So he covered his face a little bit, he disguised himself. And so the Syrian army was coming, and they were getting closer to King Ahab, and they said, that's not King Ahab, don't attack him. But there was one Syrian bowman, one Syrian archer who saw King Ahab, and he said, that's the king. And he pulled his bow, and he unleashed the arrow and struck King Ahab and killed him. And that was the end of King Ahab. So what ended King Ahab? What ended the king of Israel was his hubris. And so you see Israel full of hubris, thinking, we will have America in our pocket no matter what. We will have the Americans in our pocket no matter what. But then you see the polls. You see that As of October of last year, 59% of Americans are against Israel. You see the fact that anti-Israel media outlets are more popular than pro-Israel media outlets. You see the waves roaring against Israel, and you see how more and more every year it's becoming more and more politically disadvantageous to be pro-Israel. And it's going to come to a point where politicians are not going to want to express favor towards Israel because they are going to want to win elections. And so if they say, well, we're pro-Israel, it's going to come to the point where if a politician says, I'm pro-Israel, he's not going to win. It's going to come a point where a politician will go to the Wailing Wall and people are not going to want to vote for him. It's going to come to the point where a politician will say, I hate Israel, and he will win an election. And we've already seen that with Zohran Mamdani, but it's going to get to an apex. It's going to get to the point where that is going to be the rule and not the exception. And so eventually Israel will be abandoned. And its hubris will be deflated. And the world will say, here lies Jerusalem in flames. Jerusalem, Jerusalem has fallen. And so it really doesn't matter what Israel does. If Israel defeats the Ayatollah regime, Turkey is just going to enter Iran with America's blessing, because America will say, well, Turkey is a massive member of NATO. It's the second biggest member of NATO. We need Turkey to be there to be a force of stability. If Iran still has its regime and the regime is intact, but Iran is full of chaos because of the war, Turkey will say, well, we have to deploy our troops to bring stability because we don't want to have a Iranian refugee crisis into our country. And so Turkey will still get stronger. Let's say that Iran loses the war, but the regime is still there, but Iran surrenders or sues for a ceasefire, requests a ceasefire, but the regime is still there, but it loses. Turkey will say, okay, the regime is now weaker, we're going to get stronger. We're going to get stronger as a result of this. And Turkey will deepen its security ties with the Iranians, because you have to remember something. Right now, the Muslim world is looking for a hero against Israel. And you have the Gulf Arab countries. And the Gulf Arab countries, well, they're just fat. They're fat, and they're lazy, and they're pathetic, and they're all scared shitless of Netanyahu. All of the Gulf Arab leaders, be it the leaders of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, they're all under Israel's boot. They're all under Netanyahu's boot. And when Israel was vaporizing the Palestinians, not a hair on any Arab man's beard moved in protest. That's how terrified these people are. They're fat, lazy, and they're in bed with Israel. They have an affair with Israel. Now, they'll pay lip service to the Islamic world, but behind the scenes, they're in bed getting screwed by Israel. And so people see this, and they see, wait a second, you have this Judeo-Arab coalition fighting against Iran, and they're not joining forces with Iran. They are really in cahoots, and they are really in bed with the Israelis. So we have this Judeo-Arab coalition, and the Muslim world hates this. And so it's not politically advantageous to be in bed with Israel. It might be good for you security-wise, but it's not politically advantageous for you to be in bed with Israel. And so right now, the hero of the Islamic world is Iran. That's it, because Iran, not just Iran, but you have the Houthis and you have Hezbollah. But Hezbollah is a paramilitary organization. The Houthis are not really the government of all of Yemen, but they're still quite powerful. But really, as far as serious governments go, the only serious government that's fighting seriously against Israel is Iran. And so Iran is bombing the hell out of Israel, pounding Israel. And so now people are uplifting Iran as a hero, not just for the Islamic world, but for humanity in general. And I'm saying this as an observer. People really hate Israel. They hate the inhumanities and the cruelties and the evils that the Israelis committed against the Palestinians. And so they see Iran going to war with Israel, and they're on the side of Iran. A lot of people are supporting Iran, not just Muslims, but a lot of non-Muslims as well. And so people see this, and they're looking for a hero. They see a hero in Iran. Well, Turkey wants to become the dominant nation of the Islamic world. How is it going to do this if it's not a hero for the Islamic world against the Israelis? So the Turks are not going to want to miss out in the prestige that Iran is currently enjoying. So the Turks are deepening their security ties with Iran. It's happening right now as we speak. It's happening right now as we speak. They are deepening their security ties with the Iranians. And this is happening regardless of what happened. This is happening no matter what. And it's going to continue to happen no matter what. Because Turkey needs Iran. That's the bottom line. It needs Iran. It needs Iran, for one thing, to share in the glory, so that Turkey can be this nation of eminence in the Islamic world against the Israelis. But Turkey also has a vision of empire. Turkey wants to control all of Central Asia. Why? Because Central Asia is the motherland of the Turkic race. The Turkic race really came from Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, these Turkic countries of Central Asia. And Turkey has this vision of forming a pan-Turkic union led by, well, Turkey, led by Ankara. And Central Asia is absolutely vital if you want to be a global power. If you want to be a global superpower, you have to control Central Asia. Because Central Asia, it really is the transition point for the rest of the world. From Central Asia, you can enter the Middle East. From Central Asia, you can enter Europe. From Central Asia, you enter China. From Central Asia, you enter South Asia. You can go into Pakistan. You can go into India. Central Asia also has virtually endless amounts of energy resources like oil and natural gas. And if you control Central Asia, you control the transition point into the Middle East and into Europe and into East Asia. You really dominate the world. And so if Turkey can control Central Asia, Turkey will become a world superpower. Turkey will no longer be just a regional power in the Near East and in Europe. Turkey will become a world superpower. And so Turkey wants this. But Turkey can't have this unless it has at least an alliance with Iran. Because if you look at a map, you'll see Turkey is here and here is Iran. And so Turkey is here. Turkey has this border that connects to Iran. And from Turkey, you go right into Iran. And from Iran, you go right into Turkmenistan. You're right there. You're in Central Asia. And so if Turkey is going to be this leader of this pan-Turkic empire, it's going to have a direct land route into Central Asia. Now, right now, Turkey has direct access into Central Asia through the Caspian Sea, because Turkey controls Azerbaijan. From Baku, you go right into the Caspian Sea. From the Caspian Sea, you go right into Central Asia. But Turkey does not have a direct land route into Central Asia. It can't have that without Iran. It needs Iran. Iran is vital for Turkey's imperialist aspirations. So Turkey needs Iran. So no matter what happens, Turkey is going to entrench itself into Iran. Now, what is this war doing against Iran? It's weakening Iran. It's weakening Iran. So as you weaken Iran, you strengthen Turkey. Turkey is getting stronger. And what America and Israel are doing is absolutely it's just destructive. You're slaughtering so much human life. Children are being killed. Elementary school children have been slaughtered in mass numbers. It's horrific. And it's also destructive to Israel's security. Israel weakened Iran in Syria. Israel weakened Iran in Lebanon. Israel weakened Iran in the South Caucasus. And in every single one of those situations, Turkey got stronger. So now you're hitting Iran itself. You're not just hitting a proxy. You're hitting Iran itself, which means you're going to make Turkey even more powerful. So Israel is feeding the beast. Israel is paving the path towards its own demise. Because by weakening the Iranians, you're going to make Turkey even stronger. And Turkey will have the freedom to further entrench itself into Iran, so that it could use Iran as a direct access route into Central Asia. And right now, the Turkic Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, they are becoming more and more pro-Turkey. And they see Turkey as really one of their own. And the Turks see these Turkic countries as one of its own, as kinsmen. You guys are fellow Turks. We are all fellow Turks. Let's create a union. And Turkey right now already has its own NATO. It's called the Organization of Turkic States. And this organization is getting stronger. And Azerbaijan, being a Turkic country, is also a part of this union. And so when Azerbaijan defeated the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2023, the war began in 2020, but it really ended in 2023, the pro-Russia sentiment in Central Asia declined tremendously. And the pro-Turkey sentiment in Central Asia rose up precipitously. It rose up tremendously. And Turkey is taking advantage of this. So Turkey is getting stronger in Central Asia. Iran is getting weaker, which means Turkey is going to get stronger, not just in the Middle East in general, but in Iran specifically. And so if Turkey can really solidify ties with the Iranians, it can establish this direct land route into Central Asia. And Turkey will have more and more of the wherewithal, more and more of the geopolitical means to establish its pan-Turkic empire. And Israel will be screwed. Israel will be screwed because with this pan-Turkic empire, America will have something that Israel cannot offer. So let's say that Turkey then dominates Iran, or Turkey deepens its ties with Iran and has this Turkic union. Imagine all the things that this offers to the West. For one, let's just look at one thing here. Let's look at one aspect first here. Iran controls the vast majority of the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is the most important transit route for the exportation of oil. About, I want to say 40% of the world's oil shipped by sea goes through the Strait of Hormuz. So if you control the Strait of Hormuz, you are a dominant power in the world. You have to be taken seriously. If America can use Turkey to really put the leash on Iran, and you have this deepening of ties between Turkey and Iran, that would mean Turkey controlling the Strait of Hormuz in conjunction with the Iranians. That is something that Israel cannot offer. And if this massive NATO power, Turkey, can deepen its ties with Iran, that would be NATO's influence sinking its claws into Iran. And NATO could control the Strait of Hormuz through Turkey. If Turkey has this massive alliance with Iran and has this unfettered freedom of movement through Iran to go into Central Asia and have this continual chain from itself through Iran into Central Asia, that would mean Turkey having this pan-Turkic union. Now, this would be a massive, this would give a massive advantage to the West. That's if it continues its alliance with the Turks. Because Central Asia virtually has an endless supply of oil and natural gas and also uranium. And if you look at a map, you will see Central Asia, then there's the Caspian Sea, and across the Caspian Sea, you have Azerbaijan. From Azerbaijan, you go through Armenia. From Armenia, you go through Nakhchivan. From Nakhchivan, you're in Turkey. And so you have this pipeline, so to speak. You have this transit route for energy resources, oil and natural gas, from Central Asia across the Caspian Sea all the way into Turkey. And from Turkey, you can export natural gas and oil directly into the rest of Europe. Now, this would be a massive advantage to the Americans and the Europeans because this would mean the Europeans being able to import oil and natural gas without having to go through Russia. This is the advantage because, again, they want to weaken and isolate the Russians. And so if Turkey can control Central Asia and can have massive political leverage in Iran, then the Europeans could say, okay, well, let's now import oil and natural gas directly from Central Asia, across the Caspian Sea, through Azerbaijan, through Armenia, into Turkey, from Turkey into the Balkans, from the Balkans into Central Europe, into the rest of Europe. And we don't have to go through Russia. And this will provide us a massive advantage over the Russians. And so this is where Turkey has a geopolitical edge over the Israelis. This is the reason why when the Israelis were crying to Tom Barak, the envoy to Syria, America's envoy to Syria, that the Americans were doing things in Syria that really were to the interest of Turkey and not to Israel, America gave Israel the cold shoulder because America wants Turkey to become powerful in the Middle East, to be a counter against the Russians. So the Turks said, we're going to defeat the Kurds in northeastern Syria. The Israelis said, no, don't do this. America, don't allow Turkey to do this. America allowed Turkey to do this. Why? Because they want a powerful Turkey. Because a powerful Turkey means a massive wild card against the Russians. A powerful Turkey means the establishment of a pan-Turkic union in which the West can import oil and natural gas directly from Central Asia through Turkey and into the rest of Europe without having to go through the Russians, thus weakening and isolating the Russians economically. Also, a Turkish-Iranian alliance could also mean using this Turco-Iranian alliance against the Russians, because Iran is on Russia's underbelly. If you look at a map, you will see there's Iran, then there's Azerbaijan, then there's Russia. So Iran and Turkey are geographically very close to each other. If you can have an Iran closer to NATO through Turkey, through an alliance with Turkey, the Americans can use the Iranians against the Russians right there on their underbelly. And with Turkey, America has a wild card that it can use against Russia in the Black Sea. So Turkey provides all of these geopolitical advantages that Israel cannot provide. So when it comes to the point where Turkey is this massive power in Central Asia, in the Middle East, in the Near East, in the Caucasus, America will say, sorry, Israel, I have another master. It'll be like that scene from Aladdin where Aladdin needs help from the genie, and the genie says, sorry, Aladdin, I have another master, and that master is Jafar. Turkey is Jafar in this case. And remember it's very interesting, remember what the leaks recently said about America making the decision to go into this war against Iran. When Donald Trump was trying to determine whether or not to attack Iran, he was hesitant. And according to leaks coming from anonymous U.S. officials, Trump was told by his advisors that if he agreed to attack Iran and Iran were defeated, that would give NATO massive power in the Caucasus and in Central Asia. Well, how would NATO get massive power in the South Caucasus, in the Caucasus and in Central Asia? It would gain that power through Turkey, through a weakened Iran and through a strong Turkey. So within American political discourse in the Pentagon, they are already talking about making Turkey more powerful so that America can have access to the resources in Central Asia. So they are really working at strengthening Turkey. But in order to strengthen Turkey, you have to weaken Iran. And that's what's happening. So Israel really is hammering yet another nail in its own coffin, really. Anyway, I've said enough. I've talked enough. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.